It's funny, isn't it? You'd think with all the data we have, all those surveys and focus groups, we'd have this whole customer behavior thing figured out.
You would.
But honestly, sometimes it feels like we're missing something crucial.
Yeah.
Like those market research reports are telling one story, but what people actually buy tells a whole different one.
Right, exactly.
And don't even get me started on how those traditional advertising pre-tests seem to be getting less reliable. So what's the deal? What's really going on in people's heads when they decide to buy something?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And I think for a long time, we've been approaching it from a limited perspective.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We've been asking people to consciously explain motivations that might actually be running much deeper on a completely unconscious level.
So that gap we see between what people say and what they actually do, that's where those traditional methods start to break down.
That's exactly it.
Fascinating. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today on the deep dive.
Oh, good.
We're going to look at consumer behavior through a whole new lens, brain science.
Okay.
And we're going to uncover how it can totally change the way we think about marketing.
A whole new world.
We've been diving deep into some incredible source material, specifically the book, Neuromarketing, by Ippei Hagiwara.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It really breaks down how our brains make decisions, often without us even realizing it.
Really fascinating stuff.
Now, before we jump in, I want to make it clear that this isn't about some sort of manipulative mind control.
Right. It's not about trickery.
It's about understanding those unconscious drivers, the underlying needs and desires that shape our choices.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it's about how businesses can use that knowledge to connect with their customers on a deeper level.
Create genuine connections.
So our goal today is to extract those key principles from Hagiwara's work that will help you, the listener, really grasp what's going on behind the scenes of consumer behavior.
It's going to be a fun ride.
We'll be talking about surprising facts about unconscious decision-making, the roles that emotions and memory play, and some really innovative approaches that go way beyond those traditional marketing strategies.
It's going to change the way you think about marketing.
So with that in mind, let's get started. I'm really curious about this whole idea of traditional methods falling short. Why do those questionnaires and focus groups, the go-to tools, why don't they always give us the full picture?
Well, Hagiwara's book actually does a fantastic job of dissecting the limitations of traditional market research.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think about it. When we use questionnaires or group interviews, we rely on people to be able to accurately put their thoughts and feelings into words.
Yeah, makes sense.
But here's the catch. A huge portion of our mental processing, and some estimates say it's as much as 95%, happens without us even being aware of it.
Wow, 95%.
That's right. So in essence, we're asking people to explain decisions that are being driven by processes they have no conscious access to. It's like trying to explain a gut feeling. You just have it right.
It is. It's like trying to explain why you find a certain song catchy.
Yeah, exactly.
It just is. You can't always break it down into words.
Right. You can't analyze it to death.
And the book also talks about how difficult it is to measure subjective experiences, like whether you enjoy a specific flavor on a numerical scale.
That's another huge issue.
How do you really quantify something as personal as taste?
You can't really. I mean, think about those scales that ask you to rate deliciousness. They're asking everyone to translate their unique personal experience into the same set of numbers.
Right.
But is a jump from a 7 to an 8 on a 1 to 10 scale,
Yeah.
does that really represent the same increase in enjoyment for every person?
Probably not.
I mean, especially in a market where most products are already pretty good. Those subtle differences in how much people like something, those are incredibly hard to capture with just a number.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's not just about how we measure things, but also how we even ask the questions in the first place. The book talks about how the way we phrase things, even the order in which we ask questions, can actually influence the answers we get.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Something about priming and anchoring, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the way a question is worded, where it sits within a survey, these seemingly little things can actually subtly guide the person's response.
It's wild.
The book gives this great example. If you see a car, a boat, and a train, what flies in the sky?
Oh, okay, I see where this is going.
Most people will automatically say airplane.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
But the question doesn't actually specify that it has to be some kind of vehicle. Birds fly too.
Oh, that's
That's priming, those initial examples.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of subconsciously influence how you interpret the question.
Wow.
And then there's anchoring, where the order of questions can create this mental reference point.
Okay.
And that can then influence how someone answers the later questions.
So without even realizing it, we could be shaping the answers we get just by the way we ask the questions.
Exactly.
We might end up only seeing what we already expect to see and missing out on all those unexpected discoveries.
Exactly. And traditional research, a lot of times it operates by testing predefined hypotheses.
Yeah, yeah.
But what about all those things we haven't even thought to ask about?
Right, right.
Those unexpected insights, the things that could completely change our understanding, those are probably going to stay hidden if we're only looking for confirmation of what we already think we know.
That's a great point. And then the book also mentions how people tend to give answers that make them look good,
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
or answers that fit in with what they think the group wants to hear.
The whole social desirability thing.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to avoid any internal conflict.
Avoiding that cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
So that desire to maintain a positive self-image, it can introduce a lot of bias into survey responses.
It's like you're not really getting their true opinion.
Exactly. Especially in group settings, where there's that added pressure to conform.
People might just say what they think they should say, not what they actually believe.
Exactly. The book talks about this really interesting study by NICT that used brainwave technology to measure how people were reacting to celebrities.
Okay.
And they found instances where the brain's responses actually contradicted what the people said in questionnaires.
Oh, wow. So they're saying one thing, but their brain is telling a totally different story.
Exactly. It's like their conscious responses were being filtered through all these societal stereotypes about what they thought they should be feeling or saying.
That's incredible. It's like your brain is having one reaction, but your conscious mind is trying to make it fit into this neat little box of what's acceptable.
It's trying to make sense of it all.
It really highlights how complex this all is. And then on top of all that, there's this whole issue of relying on our memories after we've already made a purchase.
Oh yeah, memory can be a tricky thing.
The book talks about choice blindness, which sounds kind of bizarre.
It is. It's this phenomenon where people often don't even realize when their choices have been switched.
What?
Yeah, and then they go on to rationalize that swapped outcome as if it was what they wanted all along.
That's so strange.
The book describes these experiments where people were asked to choose their favorite face from 2 photographs,
Okay.
but the researchers would secretly swap the photos.
Oh, sneaky.
And a surprising number of people didn't even notice the switch.
So they end up explaining why they prefer a face that they didn't actually pick in the first place.
Exactly, they'd come up with all these reasons, completely convinced.
Wow.
And there's this other experiment, the jam tasting one, where people tasted 2 different jams, picked their favorite, and then the researchers gave them the other one instead.
Okay.
Again, many people didn't realize the switch and still gave reasons for liking the jam they hadn't initially chosen.
So basically, what we think we remember about why we chase something, it might not actually be the real reason at all.
It might be our brains trying to make sense of things after the fact.
That's really mind-blowing.
It is. And the book even points to this fMRI study where they found that activity in the nucleus accumbens, a part of the brain associated with reward, was a better predictor of future music sales than the conscious preferences people stated in questionnaires.
So their brains were already telling us what they were going to buy even before they consciously knew it themselves.
Exactly, which really emphasizes the power of these unconscious processes in driving our actual behavior.
So much happening beneath the surface.
All the time.
This is also fascinating, but it also makes you wonder, if we can't fully trust what people say and their memories aren't always reliable, how do we really understand what drives their choices?
Well, that's where brain science really comes in. And the book keeps coming back to the power of the unconscious mind.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
It's like the key to unlocking the puzzle. The book emphasizes that the vast majority of our decisions and actions, something like 95%, are driven by our unconscious mind.
95%. That's almost everything.
It is. It is. Think of it like an iceberg. The conscious thoughts we're aware of, those are just the tip, the small part you see above the water.
Okay.
But beneath the surface, there's this massive amount of automatic processing going on that's the unconscious mind.
That's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. I mean, can you give us a relatable example of an unconscious action in our daily lives?
Oh, absolutely. The book uses the example of hitting the snooze button on your alarm clock.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you do it without even fully waking up.
I've definitely done that.
Your brain hears that sound, it recognizes it's the alarm, and it initiates the action to make it stop, all before you're even consciously aware of what you're doing.
It's like a reflex almost.
It's a habit. an unconscious response to a familiar stimulus.
I never thought of it that way. And the book also talks about this half-second delay between an unconscious action and when we actually become aware of it.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast it all happens.
It's such a tiny amount of time, but it has huge implications when it comes to really understanding our own motivations.
It does, it does. That tiny delay highlights how our brains often initiate actions before our conscious awareness catches up.
So by the time we think we've made a decision, our unconscious has already gotten the ball rolling.
Exactly. And this has huge implications for consumer behavior. It suggests that a lot of purchasing decisions are probably being made subconsciously, driven by factors we're not even aware of as we're reaching for our wallets.
So it's not always a logical step-by-step process.
Not necessarily. There's a lot happening beneath the surface.
Okay, so we've got all this activity going on inside our individual brains, but how does that connect to the idea of a market?
Right.
The book draws this really interesting parallel between the brain as a network and the market as a network of brains.
Yeah, that's one of the things I found most insightful about the book. It starts by explaining that our brain is this incredibly complex network.
Billions of neurons, all firing away.
Exactly. And then it takes that idea and extends it to the concept of a market. It suggests that a market is basically a network of individual brains that are connected by their shared needs and desires.
So it's not just about individual people making choices in isolation.
It's about the collective. And think about the fashion market. It's not just about individual clothes or shoes. It's about a whole network of people who share a desire for certain styles, ways of expressing themselves.
Okay, I see what you mean.
And the same goes for, say, the hunger market. It connects a network of brains that have a shared need for food, which draws them to restaurants or grocery stores.
So businesses aren't just selling products into a void.
Nope.
They're trying to tap into those needs and desires that exist within this interconnected web of minds.
You're trying to meet the needs of a network of brands.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. It really shifts your perspective.
Right.
And speaking of needs and desires, a huge part of what shapes those has to be emotions and memory, right?
Absolutely. They're essential.
The book dives pretty deep into those areas.
It does. It does. It makes it clear that emotions are fundamental drivers of our behavior.
Okay.
It describes them as pleasant and unpleasant emotional fluctuations that are triggered by all sorts of things, both internal and external.
So basically, how we feel about things is constantly pushing and pulling us in different directions.
Yeah, essentially, our brains are always striving to maintain positive emotional states and avoid negative ones. It's a basic survival mechanism.
We want to feel good and avoid feeling bad. Makes sense. But how does memory fit into all of this?
Well, memory plays a crucial role in shaping those emotional responses. It guides our future choices based on past experiences. The book outlines the 3 stages of memory: encoding, which is how we take in information in the first place; storage, how we retain that information; and retrieval, how we access it later.
Encoding, storage, and retrieval.
Exactly. It also distinguishes between different types of memory: working memory, which is very short-term memory, and long-term memory, where we store information for extended periods.
So how do we make sure the important stuff gets into that long-term memory?
Well, the book contrasts rote memorization with emotionally engaging experiences.
Okay.
It even mentions the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which shows how quickly we forget information if there's no emotional connection or if we don't repeat it.
We've all been there, cramming for a test and forgetting everything the next day.
Exactly. But stories, on the other hand, they tap into our emotions. So they're much more memorable than just a list of facts.
That's why storytelling is such a powerful tool in marketing.
It is. It creates that emotional hook that helps people remember.
It makes the brand or the message stick. And the book also talks about memory tags,
Yes, associating a product with specific sensory details.
like a scent or a color.
Exactly. Those tags act as retrieval cues, making it easier for us to remember the product later.
So it's about creating those strong associations.
Exactly. And the book talks about the classic Coca-Cola versus Pepsi taste test, where people's preference was heavily influenced by brand recognition, even when they were tasting the same thing.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It just shows how powerful a brand can be as a memory tag, triggering all those positive associations.
The logo, the colors, the whole experience.
It all comes flooding back. And then there was this concept of chunking in memory. What was that all about?
Yes, chunking. That's our brain's way of grouping information into manageable units.
To make it easier to remember.
Exactly. The book mentions the old 7 plus or minus 2 rule for short-term memory,
Oh, yeah.
although more recent research suggests it's probably closer to 4 plus or minus 1 chunks.
So our brains can only handle so much information at once,
Right, which is why it's so important to think about how we present information.
especially when we're designing websites or apps.
Exactly. If you overwhelm people with too many choices, too much information, it becomes harder to process and remember.
That's why they say less is more.
And the book even references Steve Jobs' 3-click rule for website navigation.
I've heard of that. It's about keeping things simple, right?
Exactly. The idea is to minimize the number of steps someone needs to take to complete a task.
Makes it easier for them to figure it out and remember how to use it.
Precisely. The book uses the Macintosh trash can icon as a great example of this.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's so simple, so intuitive. It taps into our real-world experience of throwing things away.
Everyone knows what a trash can is for.
Exactly. It's a perfect visual chunk that communicates its function immediately.
So it's all about working with the way our brains naturally process information.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're constantly juggling these emotions and memories, trying to make sense of the world.
And make decisions.
But the book also talked about these two fundamental human tendencies, the drive for new experiences versus sticking with what's familiar.
Ah, yes. The novelty versus familiarity tension.
It's like we're always torn between those two impulses.
We are. There's this inherent pull towards novelty, the excitement of the new and unknown, and the comfort and security of familiarity, sticking with what we know and trust.
And both of these have deep roots in our evolution.
They do.
Ah.
Familiarity, sticking with what was known, that was often essential for survival.
Especially in the early days.
Exactly. Avoiding those potentially dangerous foods, sticking to safe paths, that increased the chances of survival.
But then there's that drive for novelty.
Yeah, equally important. It pushed our ancestors to explore, to find new food sources, better shelter, to keep pushing forward.
So how does this play out in the world of consumer behavior and business strategy? I mean, it can't just be about constantly chasing the next shiny new thing, can it?
No, it's more nuanced than that. Successful organizations, they need to find that sweet spot, that balance between those two impulses.
Appealing to both the need for novelty and the desire for familiarity.
Precisely. The book gives the example of Recruit, a Japanese company known for its ability to foster new ventures.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
It suggests that embracing a degree of novelty seeking, that can be a really powerful driver of growth.
But then on the flip side, it also talks about the challenges that established companies often face when they try to be innovative.
It's true. Those big companies, they often have these deeply ingrained cultures, risk aversion, all of that leans towards familiarity.
Makes it harder to shake things up.
It does. But then the book points to examples like Fujitsu spinning off FANUC, Yamaha Motor, as successful exceptions.
So it is possible.
It is. It shows that when you truly encourage and support novelty, you can create these really innovative offshoots.
So it sounds like businesses need to think about where their customers might fall on that spectrum of novelty versus familiarity.
And it's not just about the customers. It's about the company's own internal culture, how it approaches innovation.
It's a complex equation.
It is.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the limits of traditional research, the power of the unconscious mind, those core principles of emotions, memory, and this balance between novelty and familiarity.
It's a lot to digest.
It is. But I'm curious, how can businesses actually apply all of this in their marketing efforts? The book introduces this concept of nudging, which I found really intriguing.
Oh, yeah. Nudging is a fascinating approach. It's
Yeah.
about using our understanding of these unconscious biases and tendencies to gently influence behavior.
Okay.
And it's not about forcing people to do anything. It's about making the desired choice the easier, more natural one.
Can you give us some real-world examples of how nudging works?
Absolutely. Think about those speed bumps on a road.
Oh, yeah.
They don't force you to slow down,
Yeah.
but they sure do encourage it.
Definitely don't want to go flying over those.
And even just changes in road markings, like visually narrowing a lane, can have a similar effect.
Just say.
The book also mentions things like placing religious statues in areas that are prone to littering,
Okay.
which subtly appeals to social norms and that sense of being observed, nudging people toward cleaner behavior.
So it's about creating an environment that encourages certain choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the digital world, those default settings on websites, those are a powerful nudge.
Oh, yeah. I always just go with the pre-selected option.
Most people do. We tend to stick with the path of least resistance.
And the book also mentioned that commitment itself can act as a sort of self-imposed nudge.
Yes, that's a powerful one. When we make a public commitment to do something, it creates this internal pressure to follow through.
We want to be consistent with what we've said.
Exactly. And we want to be seen as reliable by others.
So it's about tapping into those motivations to encourage positive behavior.
Precisely. And it's all about being ethical, not about manipulating people.
It's about making those good choices easier and more appealing.
Exactly. Designing choices and environments that resonate with those underlying human tendencies.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive.
It has. It has.
So much to think about. If you had to sum it all up, what's the one key takeaway you'd want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the core message is that understanding the unconscious mind, it's not just some niche marketing strategy anymore.
Right.
It's absolutely essential for anyone who wants to truly connect with their customers.
It's about moving beyond just asking people what they want and actually understanding how their brains work. It's
Exactly.
about recognizing the limitations of traditional research and embracing those insights from brain science.
It gives us a much richer understanding of what drives people's decisions.
So by understanding those unconscious drivers, the role of emotions, how memory works, and that delicate balance between novelty and familiarity, businesses can create more effective products, more resonant marketing campaigns, and ultimately stronger relationships with their customers.
It's about moving beyond just selling and actually connecting on a human level.
It's about appealing to both the heart and the mind.
Precisely.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and given you some food for thought. We encourage you to explore these concepts further. Think about how they might apply to your own field or areas of interest.
There's a whole world out there to discover.
So keep an open mind, keep questioning, and keep exploring. And who knows, maybe you'll unlock some hidden insights that will change the way you think about the world around you.
All about the journey.